So kick things off for broadcast. Peter Stevenson, Sky Sports News.
Sean, good afternoon. Hope you're well.
Afternoon, and you?
Nice to see you. Can I just start by asking you where you stand at the moment as a squad with COVID and with injuries? Because you've obviously had your fair share of problems.
Yeah, we've got a few, but they're beginning to come back. We're looking a bit healthier on different ways with COVID and injuries. Ones that are missing, Barnes is still getting over his injury, but he's beginning to get on the grass with us now. I mean, it'll be a bit of time, but it's good to see him at least around the group. Not ready yet, obviously. Charlie Taylor's touch and go, got a knock on his foot last weekend in a training game, so he's touch and go. Eric Peters is back in the building after the COVID thing. Johan's back in the building just today, and Eric Peters today, training with the group. Dwight's been back with the group. Dale Stevens back with the group first day today. Trying to think who else. Connor's okay. I think that's more or less everyone who's been missing. There might be someone else. It's been a quite a long list, as you can imagine. And the different people returning and some going out because of COVID, and then obviously injuries and stuff like that. Woody going as well. You know, you had all of them things in the crazy. Maxwell's still away, of course, or at least still next Wednesday, it seems, and we'll see what happens then. But yeah, a few coming back, but still a few missing. So
you would hope, fingers crossed, that you're able to play this weekend?
I would hope so, yeah. Looking at the group today, we've got, I think there was about 16 out there today. So at least that's getting back to where the group wants to be. So yeah, we should be fine.
I know everybody's been affected by the COVID problem, but with your size of squad in particular and the number of games that you've had missing, just how disruptive has the last few weeks been in terms of players' rhythm, training and playing and everything else?
Yeah, it's been difficult, but it's just the reality of what it is. You know, there's varying clubs are going through the ups and downs of it and been through the ups and downs of it. We hope, you never know, but we hope that we've parked our little spell of firstly COVID, and obviously the rules might be changing, or it seems the rules might be changing, but anyway, hopefully we've come through our spell. Probably, the way it seems, you're probably going to get more situations, but as suggested, if the rules change or you know, soften in the favour of the players to get more pitch time, as in training time and quicker recoveries, we'll have to wait and see. But it's not just us, look, it's affected other teams. We've had a couple of really important games in the sense of when the other team were having troubles actually with COVID and situations, and we were stronger. You know, if they'd have got the team out there, we might have done better because of that reason. But everyone's going through it, so it's not ideal, it's not helpful, but it's a reality of the industry at the moment.
You're 4 games behind some teams, so I guess the fact that at least one game now against Watford looked like it's going to happen on the 5th of Feb, which is the FA Cup 4th round, that's what Watford I think we're after. Is that the common sense approach for you?
Yeah, look, I mean, you know, it's a tough one because of the way the league runs, the way the FA Cup runs, of course. But, you know, we've got to try and catch the games up. You still want to try and have the best chance of them games having a kind of fairness, you know, because obviously we are going to play more games. They've got to be put in somewhere. So, yeah, we were absolutely fine with that, of course.
How big a concern is it, again, bearing in mind the size of your squad, that maybe 2 games a week might have to become the norm for a short spell?
Well, it was the norm often through last season because of the way the season worked, the backside of coming out of the COVID original lockdown. So look, I mean, that's the adaptation we're going to have to make. I don't think it's always perfect, but at the end of the day, it's there. You know, it's got to be done. The games have got to be played. We understand that. We hope the scheduling at least maximises the chance for us to have, and maybe an extra day in between games if it can allow that because of the amount of games. But we'll just have to wait and see.
Did you see Arsenal last night?
Yeah, most of it, yeah.
What did you think?
Well, they've come a long way from a tough start. You know, there's a little bit more slowly but surely they're built into what the manager's been trying to get them to do. There might be changes, obviously, sendings off and stuff like that. We'll see. I mean, but they're in a better place than they were earlier on this season. And they've worked to get in that better place. I'm sure the manager's continually working on trying to get them to push even harder. Absolutely always a tough game going to Arsenal anyway, as many places in the Premier League. But we take on the challenge, and hopefully we'll have more bodies available to actually have a better chance to take on the challenge.
It doesn't seem a particularly settled camp with red cards and players having to apologise to fans, and Aubameyang has the heart issue. I mean, do you have to almost just look for any percentage of an advantage when it comes to something like that because of the situation you're in?
No. We have to look at the realities of the players that are there, not the ones that are not, or not the ones that have got issues. We have to look at the players that are there. They've got some very, very good players. They've, as I said, they've changed the sort of way they were playing in the sense of the urgency, the edge, if you like, that I've talked about with our group. They've had a bit more of that as the season's come on. Everyone has challenges across the Premier League. They're no different, but they've still got some very, very good players.
I guess the fans will be watching the game, but also be very mindful of the fact that we've 10 days left in the window now. You've got the Wood money. Any progress to report at all in terms of your targets?
Nope.
Nothing at all?
Nope.
No. You've been linked with Andy Carroll repeatedly. He's a free agent, not attached to a club at the moment. Is that a possibility?
Is that after the no answer, or shall I answer that one as well? Still no updates.
Are you actually talking to players? Has it got to that point yet? Because I know you have your list.
Talk to players if they're agreed, and you've got a deal agreed. That's the only time you can talk to players.
So no progress to report in any transfer dealing whatsoever this window?
No, and I normally don't report it, to be fair, as you well know. So I've always tried to be respectful of other teams and other situations, and I still do, until I think the deal is open to talk about.
How concerned are you getting with, as I say, 10 days to go? Because I'm guessing you and everybody connected with the club would want bodies in before the end of January.
If the bodies, as you describe it, are the right ones, and the right ones to add to what we try and do and add to the performance level and add to the outcomes, of course, then I'm sure we're looking to do that. But the reality is that it's no concern. Concern isn't going to change it. Usually, agreements, finances, they're the things that change the situation. Most teams have an idea of players they want. It's simple as that. But the things that change it are certainly not concern. You can't buy a player with concern.
Are you in a slightly different position this year because your long-term strategy, in a way, is going to have to change because you didn't expect the Chris Wood departure?
I don't think the long-term strategy changes too much. I think the immediacy of what we can achieve, if we can achieve it in the market, is important. I think that's quite obvious. But no, I think the long-term strategy is still there. I think the new ownership group have a different kind of feel about what they want to do with it, but they do understand the immediacy. They do understand we've lost a very good player and a player who's done very well for us. They do understand that. But the rules, you can't radically change the rules. You still have to get players who can affect the group in a positive way. There is no point in signing players who at least can't challenge the group that you've got now, unless, of course, there is a different style. If they're younger development style players, of course. But what I mean is, if you're trying to get like-for-likes or players that are round about what you do, well, the idea is to get better players, or certainly ones that are on the edge of becoming better, or else there's no point.
What are your relationships like with the new regime? Because clearly you'd have had an established relationship with the past board. Now you've got new owners in who are having to get used to the idea of a window, maybe having to get used to the idea of a relegation battle. How much contact are you having to have with them now on a daily basis?
Yeah, I've got open dialogue with the relevant people that are involved and the ones that are really involved. There's people behind the scenes at the business side, of course, but certainly open dialogue with Alan, Mike Smith. They're the two people I speak to the most. But yeah, very open dialogue with them.
And they're as equally aware and I'm guessing concerned at the club situation as you are?
No, they're aware. Like I say, concern doesn't solve anything. The idea is planning, strategy, thought, process. They're the things that can hopefully make sure that we look after ourselves. So yeah, but they're aware of the situation. I'm pretty sure of that. So
hand on heart, in the next 10 days, how many new players would you hope to see in at the club? Realistically?
23.
Say again?
23.
Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend.
Cheers, Pete.
Thanks, Peter. Pete, PLP.
Oh, Sean.
Hiya.
How difficult has it been in training and in the dressing room, and indeed on the pitch? How difficult is it going to be without that focal point of Chris Wood for the first time?
Well, he wasn't here all the time we've been in the Premier League. He's played his part without a shadow. There's other good players here that we believe in. I've mentioned the last couple of weeks that we've had these challenges before, and now it's time for the group to take responsibility, which I look for them to do. And of course, the individuals who, you got to remember, when a player like that leaves, who's played a lot of football for us, there's always one behind him, knocking on my door saying, why am I not playing? Well, okay, there's a slot there that's quite open, obviously. So therefore, let's see what you've got. Let's come and take on the challenge.
Have you identified somebody who's going to give you and all the players that outlet though?
No, we've identified things that possibly could, but there's no guarantees. You know, we can all sit here and identify whoever we want to throw in that position, but no guarantees for when you can afford them. There's no guarantees that you get that player. So therefore, first of all, port of call, is looking inside your camp, looking at what you've got, looking how you can work with them, looking for them to work with the team in order to be successful. So that's always the first port of call. Pete
mentioned the games in hand. I mean, you look at Brentford, you're 5 games in hand of them. Is this, how do you view it? Is it a godsend at times, or can it be a hindrance, you know, with looking at them all stacked up?
Well, we'll see. I mean, the obvious one is that we didn't have a group that could take on the games in a competitive manner. You know, we might have got 11 out there, but then that's it. And I don't think that's right and proper for the league, let alone for ourselves. So the games that got called off, we had to call off, or the, you know, through the Premier League, of course, you know, when they look at the reports and they look at the group that you've got. So even though you might have a backlog of games, which we will have, of course, then we want the full squad to take on them games. It'd be very, very difficult to take on them games without a full squad. You know, and if we were just over the margin, we're getting back there now or somewhere closer. We want the players to come back and be fit and be available. And then if we have got more games, which we will have once the fixtures are put in place, then, you know, then at least you've got a group that can take the challenge on rather than being so in a position where you just can't take the challenge of the game on properly.
Pete mentioned Arsenal as well last night, and tempers seem to fray from the technical area onto the pitch. Can you take advantage of that with the sort of red mist that this team's displaying at the minute?
Well, it's not something that goes into our game planning. You know, they're individuals and their team ethic and what they want to put on the pitch, that's down to them. I certainly can't do anything about that. All we ask for is our players to play the right way, to play hard, play strong, but also play well. You know, that's the challenge of football. I mean, I don't know. I can't remember the last red card we had. It was that long ago. But apparently we are that really tough fighting team. Strange one, that. No red cards. I don't know. Must be some form of discipline there somewhere.
How do you win this game then, Sean?
Playing well. You can't win at Arsenal unless you play well. You can't win at Arsenal unless you do the right things. A lot of these big clubs, you know, we've done it before. We did it at Arsenal after a big, you know, a longer period of not beating them, but we did. And you have to play well. You sometimes need a bit of fortune. Sometimes these things come in your favour. You know, like I say it all the time about the big teams and playing them home and away. And I say it with good measure. You know, the fact is, it's not just about you, but the start point is for you to play well. You have to play well. You have to defend well. And then if you layer on top of that, they could have a quiet day. They could have injuries. The referee might make a decision that changes the flow or change the feel. You know, you often need other things, but the start point is always for your team, that being us, to perform.
Good luck, mate.
Thanks. Yeah, all love one. Thank you. Sorry, just quick swig and I'll be with you. Sorry. Yep. Right.
Andy Bays.
Thanks, Swifty. Hi, Sean. I think it's 4 league games in 7 weeks that you've had right now for Burnley. How big an ask has that been of you as a coaching staff to, when other teams are calling games off, that your players are fit and you've had to have sessions for them and maybe change your week? And now when you've called games off because of your own cases, just how difficult has it been?
Yeah, I think the toughest challenge that people sometimes forget is that kind of thinking where it's almost like, we can use that time to work on other things. But when you've got like 11 players training, trust me, it's hard to work on things when you've got 11, 12 players, and that's probably a lot training. And that's not just 11 or 12 for like a day. That's 11 or 12 for like 5, 6 training sessions at a time, you know, until people come back from injury and COVID, because of the way the rules are, the isolation rules. So you sort of just making sure they're as fit and well as possible, still making sure the mentality is right as well. Because players get up for games, regardless of our challenge, regardless of the league table and all that, you get up for a game. And when it's cancelled, particularly ones that have been cancelled later on, you get that kind of slow down next day and your body just sort of slows down, the brain slows down. So there's a different sort of, almost a different chemistry to when that happens. Then you've got to get ready for the next one and lo and behold, that one's off. And it just, you know, it's this up and down period. But it's, like I said, it's the challenge of what it is. It's not, you know, we haven't had this exact challenge before. excuse me, but we've had injuries, we've had periods when things are not going right. So we've had to use some of our reference points, use some of our knowledge and our experience, get some feedback from the players as well. And then the hardest thing of all, actually, is while you're losing players for injury and COVID, is obviously not to push the others so hard that they break. So, there's a balancing act. You're already down to bare bones. And then if you get a couple that go under as well, that can only add to the challenge and the problem. So, it's kind of that push and pull, push enough to make sure the players are getting enough, both mentally, physically, technically, and tactically when we can, but also pulling back enough to make sure they're well and they're full of energy and not being pushed too hard where another injury might occur.
Have you noticed that even if your players are now testing negative and coming back on day 2 or day 3 in the process you explained earlier, some players will take naturally a bit longer than others to get really back into their maximum peak fitness?
Yeah, but that's just like an injury. That's not just down to COVID. Your body will deal with injuries and deal with COVID in different ways. I was talking to Jan Gudmundsson just earlier, and he'd had a bit of a niggly injury, but he also had COVID, and he had like half a day of feeling unwell, but he still had to isolate. I had probably 3 days of feeling unwell, not drastically unwell, but flu-like and just a bit run down and all that sort of stuff. So, who gets what, how do the symptoms affect you? That, of course, leads you back to when you are allowed in, and then how you feel and how productive you are. So I think that was a tough one. And like with injuries, some players come out of injury really flying straight away. Some need a few training sessions to get back into it. So there's different strokes for different folks as people and how we work with them.
I know you mentioned a little earlier about the Premier League perhaps having a look at the guidelines for games being called off and games going ahead. Would you welcome it to be looked at, Sean? Because I know there's a date that the season has to be finished.
I was more looking, actually, I think this is right. My words were more about the idea of the isolation and when we can get them back in. Because the same point, if you've got players who, on the one hand, big debate like a month ago, which I was open about player welfare, and said I think it's off the scale. On the other hand, if a player's been doing very little because of the isolation rules at home, and then 2 sessions are meant to play a Premier League game, well, that can't be right either. So what I was suggesting was, can we get, if you've got 3 players who've all got COVID, let's just use an example, how come them 3 players, if they've all got it, can't just come in a car on their own, be trained on a football pitch away from everyone else, in the open air, obviously, get back in the car on their own, pack lunch and some fluid. At least it keeps them in the role. It keeps their bodies going. They're the ones that are well, of course. So if you're on day 3 or 4 of an isolation period, but you're allowed in most, not all, most training grounds nowadays, particularly, I think it's fair to speak of the Premier League, have got big areas where they can use away from everyone. The staff don't have to go near them. We can all use our voices, but they can still do a version of a training session in a more of a training environment. That might speed up the process, therefore, process of recovery, process ideally of not getting a further injury, because you have at least kept the body going and kept the mind going and kept that kind of feeling of being around a training group. Whether that can be achieved, possibly, if the rules are going to change anyway, we've got to wait and see, as in the country's rules, and then that will drip feed into football, I'm sure.
Can I just ask about your available strikers, Sean? You mentioned it is an opportunity for them. Have some of them who've perhaps not had the game time they've wanted this season been into you for a conversation about it?
Well, there's been a mixed bag, really, because Barnes had a long injury, or pretty long injury. J-Rod, every time he's been close, has gone either with injury or has had COVID. Vids is still struggling a bit with his hernias, so we think he's going to need an operation. We're not sure, but it's looking that way. I mean, he's managing to get by, but he's not fully fit, if you like. So the one who has stayed fit and remained until recently was Woody. The others have had a sort of a mix and match season. So they haven't been, to your point, they haven't sort of had a spell when they're fit and well and running and full on playing, if you like, to where they can be, where they've had to knock the door. They haven't always been fit enough to be in a position to do that. So we hope that changes, quite obviously. We want J-Rod fit and sharp. We want Vids, if he can carry on going, or whether he's going to need an operation, that's going to depend on the pain and the way his body deals with that. Aaron Lennon's kind of come into that thing in more latterly around that sort of number 10 mark, and Barnsley because he had a long-term injury, but we want him to get fit, we want him to get well again. So it's not been the perfect season for that idea of a balanced group in the centre forward. So like I said, there's certainly not been knocking on the door at times. They've never really had a good run or a good enough run to show their true value, if you like.
Is Jay up to full speed now, Sean? You mentioned the issues he's had.
Yeah, he's just had a bit. He's had a couple of periods of being unwell. One of the COVID periods, but we're hopeful that he should be fine.
Best of luck, Sean. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Robin, BBC Match Today. No, okay. Ian P8.
Hi, Sean. Just a couple of ones. First off, we heard that Liverpool had a number of the cases that had seen their games called off had been false positives. I just wanted to check, had any of yours been false positives, or they all been backed up by PCRs?
No, I think they've all been backed up. I haven't got the exact news for you on that, but I think ours have all been backed up on PCRs.
Okay. You said you had 16 players in training today. If that number doesn't change, will you be filling out the bench on Sunday with some of the younger players? And if so, to what extent have they been involved in first team training?
We usually have done. I mean, if you look at our past, we've always tried to get players experience and get around the group if they're available. So that's what we'd certainly look to do again. I mean, I'm not, we at times we've put the three keepers on the bench, and that's more of it's not a show of how few players we've got. Trust me, it's a show of our respect for the fact that one keeper often misses out. So it's more about that. And other times we'll put young players on. So yeah, we'll certainly try and fill out the bench if we can, as long as there's 23s. Sometimes, look, sometimes we get the experience of being around the group. It's not always we think they're ready to play, but they're around the group, they're around the environment, they're around the first team environment. It's all part of their development. Not, of course, the main thing is being on a football pitch. But all of these experiences, being away with the team, traveling, all of these things are just part of a young player's learning. So yeah, even if we don't always deem the player to be one who necessarily will almost be looking to get on, we still try and bring them with us to give them that extra bit of development about the reality of what it is.
So has they been involved in training this week with an eye to making the bench?
Yeah, we're just trying to use them. We're still going to keep their game program going. So if you're talking, I presume you're implying about, say, under 23s, We're still going to keep their game program going. So then you can't always have them train with you if they need games as well, because even with all the stretch that we're at, we've still got to give them their development the best we can. And sometimes players fall between the gaps where they're not quite in the first team. They can't get any football with the under 23s, and that's not good for anyone. We've had to park some of the games, of course, because we've got to try and fulfil the task of the first team, whilst keeping our eye on the fact that they're still getting games.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Alex James.
Hi, Sean.
Hi.
Just to clarify then, is Matej Vydra fit for the weekend, or are you going to wait and see how he gets on over the next
couple of days? He's trained today, and it just depends how it reacts, but he's trained today and he's fine.
We touched on Jay Rodriguez there earlier. How important is he now for you, given that, I guess, if you were looking like for like as to who your natural replacement for Woody would be, it would be Jay, and we've perhaps not seen the best of him this season, for, as you mentioned, injuries and illness playing a part in that.
Yeah, I mean, he's been close to being on the team sheet to start anyway, and then he's had, as we said, early season had hamstring, there's been illness and COVID and the like. Jay's got a big history of playing for Burnley, of course, but also he's got a very good history of playing in the Premier League. So we certainly think he can operate for us.
I don't think he scored a Premier League goal since last February at the moment, but he has sort of found his form in the cup a little bit, and we've seen that he's still got what it takes to perform at this level.
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I don't know how many games he's played since last February, but he must be due one, don't he?
Absolutely. Just on the window, does the sale of Chris Wood and that money that's come into the club in some ways, is that making it harder for you to recruit, given that everyone knows you've had some money come into the club and everyone knows you're looking for a replacement?
I don't know about harder. It's just the reality of the market. That happens to all teams. You get some money for a player and they think you've got money, and then the numbers change. That's just life. That's the way it goes. I don't really get too bogged down with that. I've said before, if you think your house is worth a certain amount and the bloke at the road sells it for more, or the lady at the road for that matter sells it for more, well, guess what? You suddenly think yours is worth more. It's just the way it is. So that's just like life. It's just like the industry that we're in football.
We've spoken before about potentially looking further afield, and Maxwell was an example of perhaps shopping in different markets with the new owners. How are you sort of able to do that as a club? Have you invested a little bit more in scouts overseas? Is there more of a reliance on data? Are you able to get out to games a little bit more now in Europe with the COVID situation?
Well, the eyes on the road have been better for obvious reasons. You know, still a bit tricky certain places, but generally managing to get eyes on players, physical eyes, you know, getting there to games as you suggested, backed up by the support of analysis, backed up by the years of following a player sometimes. You know, Maxwell was one that had been on the system for a while, you know, been following that player for a while. Just got to get to a situation where all the, you know, the alignment works from the player, from the clubs, from the fees. But yeah, there's plenty going on behind the scenes of analysis to try and get the right players. It's still a work in progress. It probably always is.
It seems from the outside that perhaps there's more of a willingness to go and look overseas than there was before. I was just wondering if that had sort of translated to maybe investment in scouts or investment in data, etc.
I think there was some investment in that. I think the belief in the risk and reward scenario has probably changed. I think, you know, there's probably a more open-minded approach as regards the risk of the finance for a foreign player coming into Burnley, getting used to the environment. And the risk and reward of that from the new ownership. I think that's fair to say. I've always thought I was quite open-minded about that myself, but as I've said, in many reasons, in a right way, the outgoing board wanted more of a safe bet feel because they're still building the club and wanted the finances to be safer, that's for sure. So, you know, there's always been that side of it. So I think there's a more open-mindedness, but of course, to be fair, whilst I say about open-mindedness, don't forget when the new ownership came in, years have been put into more scouting. Years have been put into more scouting in Europe. So therefore, we are getting to a point, at least we've got some data, some background, some support, and some physical year markers. You know, like a player we might have been tracking from a young player is now 2 or 3 years older. So therefore, they might have been playing enough of where we deem it they're in a position to be ready, for example. So to be fair, a mixture of all that. New ownership came in, but also we've been putting things in place for a longer period to be ready.
Yeah, building from a better base, I guess. Yeah, we saw Alan Pace put out a statement yesterday just on the sort of financial situation, amid a bit of sort of outside noise from national media and where have you. Is that something you concern yourself with? I know you've always spoken about stretching, not breaking the club. Do you ever sort of worry about the financial future of the club at all?
No, it's not my world. You know, that's for the business people. The deals that are in place, the paperwork, all of them things. I certainly don't oversee that. I trust in what they're telling you. I trust in what the club are trying to achieve. I trust in the deals that have been done. My job is to concentrate and focus on the football side of things. I do have a say in other things, but certainly not the deals. That's not my domain.
Yeah, as you say, I guess it's an element of trust, isn't it? You've got to trust what people are telling you and see with your own eyes the investment in the club, as we saw in the summer in terms of money for a transfer.
It's just an element of leaving them to get on with the business. You know, me getting on with the football.